you may work for a ministry, maybe you volunteer, maybe you give a donation to a ministry, and you just assume, well, it's nonprofit. Of course, it's fine. It's shiny on the outside. I'm sure everything that happens on the inside is fine and legitimate. That might not be the case. There are ministries that you might not want to actually volunteer for, work for, give funds to, based on what's happening on the things that you can't see. We're going to bring in an expert today. His name is Warren Smith. He wrote the book, Faith-Based Fraud. Whew, those are cutting words, Warren. Welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be on the program with you. Appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you so much. Before I make some assumptions, is just jump to conclusions of what the book's about, why don't you share, what is your heart behind the book? What prompted you to write it?
Well, several things did, Suzanne. First of all, I want to just stipulate for the record that there are more than 1 million Christian nonprofits in this country, if you include all the churches and nonprofits. And the vast majority of them are just doing great work. They're led by leaders who are just really have high integrity, and they often are not getting paid much, doing sacrificial work. And, we just want to affirm those. Unfortunately, however, there are a few others that are trying to take advantage of that great name that Christianity and that Christian ministries have in the world. They want to take advantage of donors. They want to take advantage of folks that, might be volunteering there or might be showing up to support their ministries in some way. And those are the folks that we write about mostly at Ministry Watch and in the book, Faith-Based Fraud. We tell stories about organizations that have been engaged in wrongdoing, individuals who have been engaged in wrongdoing, not because we want to be TMZ or a tabloid, supermarket tabloid, but because we want to derive lessons from those ministries so that we don't inadvertently go down the path that they have gone down. Because the truth is, Suzanne, most of these ministries that do bad stuff start out doing really great things, but they get sucked into some bad habits and some bad behaviors, and that's what leads them down that path. And secondly, we just want to warn donors. We want donors and others that might be otherwise seduced by, as you say, the sort of shiny exterior of these ministries, to know some of the key questions that they should ask before they get involved with these ministries.
It's such an important thing. And when we talk about not knowing, just kind of safely assuming, we're not asking a lot of questions. We just kind of assume it's Christian ministry. I mean, is part of the problem that because the word ministry can almost turn into a business, it can almost turn into a product for people over time, I think.
Well, it certainly can. In fact, the nonprofit sector in this country employs about 7% of all people. I mean, you look at, other big industries in this country, very few of them employ, in that range of 7, 8, 9%. It's mostly spread out over many industries. So the fact that so many people are employed there, even in the Christian world, Suzanne, we've got about 1,000 Christian ministries in what we call the Ministry Watch 1000 database. So the 1,000 largest Christian ministries in the country, they represent about $36 billion in annual revenue. Most of that is giving. Most of that is donations from individuals. That's 36 billion with a B. It's a huge amount of money. Some of these ministries are very, very large. World Vision, Compassion International are both more than $1 billion a year. And, lots of ministries, you've got to be at least $5 or $6 million a year even to get on our list. So, it's becoming a big business. And if you were in the private sector and you were, say, for example, a publicly traded company, the salaries of your senior executives had to be known. The names of the boards of directors would have to be known. There's a tremendous amount of disclosure that is required of an organization that is for profit. Unfortunately, we don't have that level of transparency and disclosure in the nonprofit sector. And so as a consequence, lots of donors just think, well, they're a Christian ministry. I like what they do. I listen to them on the radio, or I read the stuff they put out, and I mostly agree with it. Therefore, they must be good people, and I'm going to give to them. But there are lots of questions that we need to ask in addition to that.
Warren, you make such a great point. There is a huge chasm between the law-keeping nonprofits and for-profit straight, and then the other side of that big, chasm that I was just talking about.
Yeah.
When Christian leaders go astray, as sometimes they will, it there's sometimes nothing ethical that can keep them in line if they don't have proper board setup, if they have founders clause, if they have a lot of extra protection that for-profits seem to have in place that nonprofits don't. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So just to kind of bring it down to the donor level, or it might be some of our listeners. Okay, well, what
Mm,
question should I be asking? Number
mhm,
one, you should be looking at the Form 990, which is a document that every nonprofit in the country, if you're not a church, has to file. And that Form 990 is available in lots of places. You can find it at ProPublica, you can find it at Charity Navigator, you can find them at the Ministry Watch website. We actually have the financial statements again of the 1,000 largest ministries at our website, and we get that information from the Form 990s. The Form 990s will have salaries of the senior leaders. It'll have how much money was taken in, where that money goes, how much money was spent on fundraising. I think I mentioned the names of the board members, but that's if I
mhm.
didn't, or even if I did mention, let me mention it again because that is just so important.
Yeah, it is.
A nonprofit should have what we call an independent board. That means the board members shouldn't work for the organization and they shouldn't be related to people who work for the organization, including the president or the founder of the organization. That's how you know that that a board is truly independent. Lots of organizations do this. As I said, there are more than 1 million Christian nonprofits in this country. Most of them do it right, but a few don't. A couple of years ago, we started hearing about Ravi Zacharias and Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, which, of course, Ravi was a well-known apologist doing a lot of great work in the world. I considered Ravi a friend. But in 2014, Suzanne, they stopped releasing their Form 990s to the public. We reported on that here at Ministry Watch, but the reports kind of fell on deaf ears because people were like, well, what difference does that make? Well, the difference
Mhm,
that it makes is this, that once you can start doing things in secret, in
mm,
darkness, bad habits start creeping into your behavior.
mm.
Unfortunately, we now know that that is exactly what happened to Ravi Zacharias and Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, and it has evolved into this massive scandal that has really been terrible for the church and for Christian ministries and for the body of Christ generally. And we're trying to prevent that from happening by bringing transparency and accountability to the Christian ministry marketplace.
That's really the key is accountability and transparency. That's a good thing for everybody to have transparency and accountability, not just nonprofits, but certainly if we're going to volunteer or work or give our money, that should be just like the low hanging fruit. That should be the foundation of what a ministry is built on.
Well, I think that's exactly right. That's the reason, we do a lot of stuff here at Ministry Watch. And if you read my book, Faith-Based Fraud, you'll read just, dozens and dozens of stories that we tell about ministries. But, it's easy to get lost in the weeds. We need to come
Yeah.
back exactly to what you just said: transparency and accountability. Transparency and
Yeah.
accountability. I sort of preach that sermon over and over again. The folks that are in my life on a day-to-day basis are like, Warren, that's all you ever talk about is transparency and accountability. Well, and the reason is because if we start there and end there, if
Mhm.
we try to just make sure that we're being as transparent as we can, and for Christian ministry that means doing audits and releasing their Form 990s to the public, and the accountability, having an independent board. If we didn't do any more than just those things, I think that the Christian ministry world would be improved dramatically. Every scandal that I have looked at, there's been a problem in just one of those three areas. They didn't release their Form 990s to the public. They didn't do an audit. They didn't have an independent board.
Or are there other ministries, I'm not trying to shame anyone, but we're trying
Yeah.
to raise a flag. I mean, are there any other ministries? You had mentioned Ravi, but who else that we should be kind of looking out for that maybe still in ministry, but they're not running on the up and up?
Yeah, well, there, again, the good news is the vast majority of ministries are doing great work in the world. But we've seen a lot of scandals. Like we saw Bill Hybels in Willow Creek Church, for
Mhm,
example, in recent years. That's a Chicago area church that has had enormous impact in the country. And once again, we saw an example at Willow Creek Church of an organization that was not transparent. There was no accountability. Bill Hybels, the pastor, anybody that could, Bill Hybels, the pastor, couldn't be confronted by the people on his staff because he could just fire them or he could choose not to listen to them. Mark Driscoll, I know some of our listeners have probably heard the Christianity Today podcast called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. It's just really a
Amazing.
remarkable podcast. And, that's another good example. Mars Hill Church had about 35 or 36 elders. You would think that in a church, in that kind of a church, the elders are supposed to be performing the function of the board of directors. They were supposed to be providing accountability. But when I started reporting on Mars Hill Church back in 2013 and 2014, I discovered that 33 of the 36 elders, at least at that time, were actually employees of the church. If they confronted Mark Driscoll on anything that they were concerned about, Mark could just fire them. And in fact, he did that on numerous occasions. So, Mars Hill Church, Willow Creek, Liberty University, which is a place I love. In fact, I was in Lynchburg, Virginia this weekend because my daughter is a senior at Liberty University. They've had some real serious problems, though, with their president. In the case of Liberty University, I think one of the big problems there is they have a board of directors that is too large. They had over 40 people on their board of directors, and it made it very difficult for someone that had concerns to speak up in a board meeting because they mostly didn't know the other board members. It took a lot of courage to speak up in front of 40 people. We recommend that boards have between 5 and 12 members. It's possible to be too large in addition to being too small. So, Suzanne, we could go on, and I know you don't want to, but these are just a few of the organizations that we have covered recently. And in every case, one of the problems that we've already identified are the problems that we saw: lack of accountability, lack of transparency, a lack of an independent board.
There are casualties that come with ministries that don't do things on the up and up, that aren't righteous in their works. And
Yep.
it's oftentimes the people of the church, congregation, donors, volunteers, employees, and it hurts. I can even hear as you're talking about this, you don't take joy in writing these stories. You're doing it because it's the right thing and you need to bring light to this. But it's a hurtful and a heartbreaking situation when you have to report on these, I'm sure. So
Well, it is, and we don't take joy in it, but we do think that as Christians we're called to be children of the light. We think transparency is a part of what it means to be children of the light. In the journalism world, there's an expression that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and so yeah, I even though I take no joy in doing this kind of work, I also sleep like a baby at night because I
yes.
know that whenever I do this kind of work, Suzanne, that as you said, there are victims involved, and we are protecting those victims. We're providing justice for those victims. We're giving a voice to those victims that otherwise would not have a voice. And I can tell you, not when you don't have a voice, when you feel powerless in a situation, it can lead to depression. It can lead to self-destructive behavior in other ways. So yeah, we don't take great joy in it. We don't take any joy in doing this kind of work, but we know that bad behavior has victims, and we want to be an advocate for those victims.
Warren, I just want to tell you, and I know that you're humble and it's difficult to give you compliments, but your reporting is so over the top, careful, and resourced and resourced again. It's pulled through so many filters of being carefully checked. You work at the highest level of any reporter I've ever seen, and I've heard reporters say that you working at the highest level that they've ever seen. So thank you for your amazing quality always to get to the truth, whatever that leads to. Warren, real quick, how can people get a hold of you and how can they get to your Ministry Watch information?
Well, I appreciate you asking that, Suzanne. They can go to ministrywatch.com, just real simple, ministrywatch.com. And if they want to email me, I'd be delighted to hear from them with story ideas or just comments about this interview. info@ministrywatch.com, real simple, info@ministrywatch.com. That email will come directly to my desk.
Okay. And Faith-Based Fraud is the name of the book. And just real quick, jumping back, Ministry Watch, you do accept donations and very much appreciate those.
Yeah, we're a nonprofit organization. In fact, as I said, we've got 1,000 of the largest Christian ministries in the country on analysis and ratings for them. We're not one of the largest. In fact, we wouldn't otherwise be qualified to be on our own list. But because we believe in transparency and accountability, you can see our profile there. But we are a Christian nonprofit organization. At ministrywatch.com, you can hit the donate button at the top of the page if you wanted to financially support us. But whether you financially support us or not, please pray for us. Pray that we would remain faithful. That's really the most important thing that you can do for our ministry.
Thank you, Warren. Have a great day.
Same to you. Thank you.